A pregnant woman kneels on the ice bound, while her son cries from the other side of the glass. The man, consumed by jealousy and manipulation, twists love into control and silent terror. But a revealing video activates her father's military past and ignites a merciless operation. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and let us know what city you're watching from. Let's continue. Frost covered the fields of Pine Ridge, Colorado, like a crystallized sheet, reflecting the pale morning light that still struggled to break through the heavy clouds. It was one of those days when the cold bit at your skin without mercy, and the wind carried the damp scent of the high country, mixed with the aroma of wood burning in the fireplaces of houses scattered across the hills. The thermometer read 28 degrees, but the wind chill was much worse. On the trees surrounding the isolated property, the bare branches bowed under the weight of the ice accumulated during the night, creating fragile sculptures that reflected the rising sun like diamonds suspended in the air. Chloe had always loved that smell of burning wood. It reminded her of a time when the world still made sense, when waking up early meant freedom, not survival. She remembered weekends at the family cabin, before everything fell apart, when her father still looked at her with pride, and she still believed that love was something simple and safe. Now that same smell brought a melancholy that ached in her chest, a longing for the person she used to be. She stood before the window of the small house she shared with Ethan, watching the vapor escape her lips with each breath. Barefoot on the cold wooden floor, she felt her feet gradually go numb, but she didn't move. Sometimes, that physical cold was almost a relief, a tangible pain that distracted her from the pain she carried inside. Her 7-month belly felt heavier than it should, not just because of the baby she carried, but because of the constant fear that had accompanied her since she'd opened her eyes that morning, since she'd felt the empty bed beside her and realized Ethan hadn't come home again. Leo, her 1-year-old son, was still asleep in the makeshift crib she had assembled in the corner of the room. The boy's rosy face was peaceful, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. Chloe watched him for a long moment, memorizing every detail of that innocence, as if she needed to store that image for the difficult days she sensed were approaching. Leo's dark, curly hair was identical to hers, but his eyes, when open, had his father's hazel tone. It was the only feature of Ethan's she could still love without reservation, reflected in that little face that knew nothing, that didn't understand why his mother cried so much lately. She touched her belly gently, as if she could protect the life growing inside her, with just the palm of her hand. The baby moved, a strong kick that made her arch her back slightly. It was a girl, she knew. She'd had the ultrasound 3 weeks ago, but hadn't told Ethan. She hadn't told him because she no longer knew how he would react to any news, couldn't predict whether there would be joy or another accusation. She was going to name her Grace, after the maternal grandmother she had never met, but who, according to family stories, had been a woman of grit who raised 4 children alone after her husband left and never came back. Outside, the sound of tires on the gravel announced Ethan's arrival. Chloe felt her stomach clench immediately, that physical reaction her body had developed over the last few months. It was as if every cell was bracing for the storm. She glanced at the clock on the wall, a wedding gift from a distant aunt. 6:30 in the morning. He shouldn't be back so early. He had left the night before saying he was going to meet friends, that he'd be back late. When he hadn't arrived by midnight, Chloe had locked herself in the room with Leo and pretended to sleep, even though she knew sleep wouldn't come. The white pickup, a Ford F-150 Ethan had insisted on buying, even though they couldn't afford it, parked with a sudden jolt that made the dishes in the sink rattle. Chloe heard the vehicle's door slam with disproportionate force, that masculine gesture that always scared her, as if every slammed door was a declaration of contained rage. Heavy footsteps approached the entrance, and she recognized their rhythm. They weren't the steps of someone tired coming home, they were the steps of someone looking for a fight. The key turned in the lock with an urgency that boded ill, that sharp movement that made the metal groan. Chloe took a deep breath, trying to prepare for whatever was coming. She smoothed down the simple dress she was wearing, ran her hands through her disheveled hair, and forced her shoulders back, assuming a posture she didn't feel. A lesson she had learned from her father: never show weakness, even when you're falling apart inside. When he walked in, Chloe knew immediately that something was wrong. She had learned to read Ethan like one reads a storm forecast, identifying the subtle signs that announced chaos. Ethan wore the expression she had learned to fear over the 2 years they had been together. His eyes were red, bloodshot from alcohol, his pupils dilated as if he'd been up all night. His jaw was clenched, the muscles in his neck bulging, his shoulders tense as if he were about to explode. His clothes were wrinkled, his beard unshaven for days, the smell of beer and cigarettes clinging to his t-shirt. He threw the keys onto the wooden table with gratuitous violence, knocking over Leo's picture frame. The glass shattered with a sharp sound. That made Chloe flinch. It was a photo from the boy's first birthday just 2 weeks ago, one of the last photos where they were all smiling. Now it was destroyed, the shards scattered on the cold floor. Chloe instinctively took a step back, positioning herself so the table was between them. A calculated move she had learned to make without thinking, always keeping obstacles between herself and his fury. "Ethan, are you okay?" she asked, keeping her voice as calm as possible, using that neutral tone that sometimes calmed things down, but other times only made them worse. "You were out all night. I was worried." He didn't answer right away. He just walked to the refrigerator with heavy steps that made the whole house tremble. That walk of a big man who took up too much space, who made everything around him smaller. He grabbed a beer from the shelf, even though it was only 6:30 in the morning, and opened it with his teeth, spitting the cap onto the floor without caring where it landed. The gesture had something animalistic, primitive about it, that always made Chloe's heart race. He drank half of it in one go, his throat working as he swallowed, then turned to her with a look Chloe couldn't quite decipher. There was anger there, yes, she recognized that anger well, but also something deeper, suspicion, accusation, and underneath it all, something that almost looked like pain. "Where were you last night?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Chloe frowned, confused. "I was here, Ethan. You know that. I spent the whole day taking care of Leo. He had a fever, remember? I texted you." He took a step forward. "You texted me, huh? And who else have you been texting, Chloe?" She felt her heart speed up. "I haven't been texting anyone. You have my phone. You can look whenever you want." "I already looked," he said, his voice rising. "And you know what I saw? I saw that you deleted conversations. I saw that you've been hiding things from me." Chloe shook her head, desperate. "I didn't delete anything, Ethan. You're imagining things. Please, let's talk calmly. Think about Leo. Think about the baby." He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Think about the baby? What if this baby isn't even mine, Chloe? Ever thought about that?" The words fell on her like a cold avalanche. Chloe felt her legs weaken. "How can you say that? How can you even think something like that?" Ethan threw the empty bottle into the sink, shattering it. "Because someone told me, Chloe. Someone told me you've been seeing another man, that you've been cheating on me, that this child you're carrying might be someone else's." She wanted to scream, to cry, but she forced herself to maintain her composure. "Who told you that, Ethan? Who's putting these lies in your head?" He moved closer, invading her space. "It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is whether it's true or not. And I'm going to find out, Chloe. One way or another, I'm going to find out." Before she could answer, Leo's cry echoed from the hallway. Chloe instinctively turned to go to her son, but Ethan grabbed her arm tightly. "Let him cry. You're going to stay here and tell me the truth." The tears finally started to stream down Chloe's face. "Ethan, please, you're hurting me. Let me go check on Leo." He let her go with a push that made her stumble backward. Go take care of... Go take care. Him. But this isn't over, Chloe. Not by a long shot." She ran to the room, picked Leo up and hugged him tightly, trying to stifle her sobs. The boy, still sleepy and confused, clung to her as if he could feel the fear emanating from his mother's body. Chloe rocked him slowly, whispering words of comfort that were as much for him as for herself. As she cradled her son, her mind drifted back in time, to the days when she still lived with her father, General Miller, in the large house in Denver, where every object had its place and every word had its weight. That mansion in the Cherry Creek neighborhood was a fortress of order and discipline, with its perfectly manicured lawns, its mahogany furniture polished to a shine, its heavy curtains that blocked not only the light, but any sign of disorder from the outside world. Arthur Miller was an imposing figure, even now in retirement, tall, with a military posture that never relaxed, grey hair cut short, eyes that seemed to assess everyone and everything in a matter of seconds. He had structured operations that changed the course of entire conflicts, trained generations of officers who now held key positions in Washington, D.C., and on missions around the world. He had represented the United States in international negotiations so secret they still couldn't be discussed openly. Respected, feared, cited in books on military strategy, decorated with medals that filled an entire room of the house. But at home, all that strength transformed into a rigidity that left no room to breathe. Chloe had grown up under inflexible rules that dictated every minute of her day. Wake up at 5 a.m., even on weekends. Bed made with perfect corners, measured with a ruler. School uniform, impeccable, not a single wrinkle. Perfect grades, nothing below an A was acceptable. Straight posture at the table, fork and knife used correctly. Chew in silence. No complaints, no weaknesses, no tears. Tears were a sign of a character flaw, Arthur would say. Strong women didn't cry, they adapted. Arthur loved his daughter, she never doubted that. But he expressed that love through demands, not affection. When she got a perfect score, he would just nod, as if it were the bare minimum. When she won school competitions, he would attend the award ceremony, but sit in the back of the auditorium, arms crossed without applauding. When she cried because other kids had more present, more affectionate parents, he would say she needed to be grateful for what she had, that millions of children didn't even have food on the table. She had tried to be the perfect daughter. She really had. She took riding lessons because he thought it was important. She learned to shoot because he insisted. She studied military strategy from the books he left on the table, hoping she would take an interest. But the more she tried to please him, the more she felt she was losing herself. Who was Chloe underneath all those expectations? What did she really want from life? When it came time to choose a career, Arthur naturally expected her to follow in his footsteps. He had it all planned out. West Point, training as a medical officer, marriage to some promising officer from a traditional family, a life of prestige and service to the country. But Chloe couldn't breathe just thinking about it. It was an April night, she remembered with painful clarity. They were having dinner in the formal dining room as always, she on one side of the long table, he on the other, miles of polished wood between them. Chloe gathered all her courage, waited for him to finish his meal according to protocol, and then spoke. "Dad, I've decided I want to be a nurse. I want to work with people, care for those who need it. I want to make a difference in a more direct way." The silence that followed was deafening. Arthur placed his fork and knife on the plate with millimeter precision, wiped his mouth with the linen napkin, folded it carefully, and then looked at her. "A nurse," he repeated, as if the word were foreign. "You have the potential to be a doctor, an officer, to command, and you want to trade that for changing bedpans and giving shots." "It's more than that, Dad," she tried to argue, her voice failing. "It's about empathy, about being there when people need it most. It's about human care, not just technical." He stood up, pushing his chair back. "You're wasting your potential on cheap sentimentality, Chloe. That's not strength. That's weakness. And I didn't raise you to be weak." Chloe felt something inside her break at that moment. She stood up too, her hands trembling. "Then maybe you didn't raise me to be myself, Dad. Maybe you raised me to be a version of you that I can never be." They didn't fight. They didn't yell. They simply drifted apart, like two continents slowly separating until the ocean between them becomes impassable. Chloe left home at 22, determined to prove she could build a life on her own, that she didn't need orders or approval. She went to work at a public hospital in Pine Ridge, where she had moved in search of a new start. There, between exhausting shifts and patients who treated her like family, she found purpose. It was also there that she met Ethan. He had shown up one night in the ER, bringing a friend who had been in a motorcycle accident. Ethan was different from all the men she had known. Tall, broad-shouldered, with that reserved manner of someone who carried stories he didn't easily tell. Also ex-military, but different from her father. Ethan seemed vulnerable, wounded by experiences he only hinted at. He said he had left the army after a mission went wrong, that he had lost comrades, that he could no longer live under the command of superiors. Chloe saw in him someone who needed care. She mistook his need for control for a search for stability. She mistook jealousy for love. She mistook isolation for protection. In the beginning, Ethan was attentive. He would text every hour wanting to know where she was, who she was talking to, what she was feeling. Chloe found it romantic. Then the questions turned into interrogations. The texts became surveillance. The gifts became emotional debts. But when she got pregnant with Leo, there was a truce. Ethan seemed to calm down, promised he would be a good father, that he would take care of her and the baby. The illusion lasted until the birth. After Leo was born, everything changed. The baby's crying irritated Ethan. The sleepless nights made him furious. Chloe tried to do everything herself to not bother him, but nothing was enough. He started going out more, drinking more, coming home late with that glazed look she had learned to fear. He started accusing her of absurd things, of looking at other men, of not taking proper care of the house, of being an incompetent mother. And then she got pregnant again. Chloe hadn't planned it. She was on birth control, but with the daily rush, with the sleepless nights caring for Leo, she had missed a few pills. When she found out, she was afraid to tell Ethan. She waited for the right moment, prepared a special dinner, tried to make it seem like good news. He had exploded. He had yelled that she had done it on purpose, to trap him, to ensure he could never leave that life. Chloe tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen. He slammed the door and only came back 2 days later, calmer but with a heavy silence that was even worse than the yelling. Since then, everything had gotten worse. Ethan started getting strange calls, locking himself in the room to talk on the phone, looking at Chloe with growing suspicion. And in the last few weeks, the accusations of cheating began. First, they were insinuations, then direct questions. Now, they were certainties. Leo finally fell asleep in her arms. Chloe placed him back in the crib carefully, covered him with the wool blanket, and stood there watching her son's peaceful face. How could she protect that innocence? How could she ensure Leo grew up without fear, without witnessing what she witnessed every day? She returned to the living room with silent steps. Ethan was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, typing furiously. When he saw her, he quickly locked the screen. Chloe sat in the rocking chair she had received when she was pregnant with Leo, keeping her distance. "Ethan, we need to talk," she said, keeping her voice firm. "This can't go on. You're accusing me of things that aren't true. You're hurting us." He looked at her coldly. "So you deny it? You deny you're cheating on me?" "I deny it," Chloe answered, tears burning her eyes again. "I've never cheated on you, Ethan. I barely leave the house. I spend all day taking care of Leo, working when I can get a few shifts at the hospital. When would I have time to cheat on you?" He stood up, starting to pace. "Then explain to me why someone sent me pictures of you talking to a man in front of the hospital. Explain why you were seen laughing, looking very comfortable." Chloe tried to think. There were so many men at the hospital, doctors, nurses, patients, family members. She talked to dozens of people every day. It was part of her job. "Ethan, I work in a hospital. I talk to a lot of people. That doesn't mean anything." "Yes, it does," he yelled, making her jump. "It means you don't respect me. It means you think you can do whatever you want behind my back." Chloe stood up too, anger finally overcoming fear. "I'm not doing anything behind your back, Ethan. And you know what's worse? You know what really hurts me? It's that you believe strangers more than you believe me. It's that you choose to believe lies instead of trusting the mother of your children." He stopped pacing and faced her. "So it's a lie? It's all a lie?" "Everything," she answered, her voice breaking. "Everything you're thinking is a lie." For a moment, Chloe thought he might believe her. She saw something waver in his eyes, a doubt, a crack of lucidity. But then his phone rang. Ethan looked at the screen, and whatever was written there made his face harden again. He answered, turning his back to her. "Hello, yeah, I'm listening." Chloe couldn't hear what the person on the other end was saying, but she saw Ethan's shoulders grow increasingly tense. He responded with monosyllables, his voice growing more agitated. "I see. No, I didn't know that. Are you sure? Okay, okay, thanks for letting me know. When he hung up, he turned to Chloe with an expression she had never seen before. There was something beyond anger there. There was conviction, absolute certainty. I just got more proof, Chloe. Proof that you're lying to me. Proof that this baby you're carrying might not even be mine. She felt the world spin. What proof, Ethan? What proof could possibly exist of something? That isn't true? He showed her his phone. On the screen there was a photo. It was Chloe, yes, talking to someone in front of the hospital, but the image was cropped in a way that made it look like she was much closer to the man than she really was. And there was a message below. She doesn't respect you, Ethan. Look how she acts when you're not around. Chloe recognized the photo. It had been taken 3 weeks ago when she had spoken with Dr. Evans, one of the hospital's doctors, about a patient's complex case. A professional conversation standing in the middle of the parking lot that had lasted less than 5 minutes, but someone had turned it into proof of an affair. Ethan, this isn't what you think, she said, desperate. That's Dr. Evans. I was talking to him about work. This was weeks ago. It's just a conversation. Just a conversation, he repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Sure. And this person who sent me the photo is lying, right? They're making it all up. Yes, they are, Chloe yelled. I don't know who it is, but they are. Someone wants to break us up. Ethan, someone wants to make you believe lies. Or someone wants to open my eyes to the truth, he retorted, putting the phone back in his pocket. You know what I think, Chloe. I think you're using me. I think you saw me as some idiot who would give you security, a house while you did whatever you wanted. She shook her head, tears now streaming freely. How can you say that? How can you destroy everything we've built because of lies from someone you don't even know? Ethan advanced on her, and Chloe instinctively backed away. He stopped inches. From her, his face contorted with rage. I'm going to find out the truth, Chloe. If it's the last thing I do, I'm going to find out if this child is mine. I'm going to find out if you really love me or if you're just pretending. Before she could answer, he grabbed the truck keys and left, slamming the door so hard the window pane rattled. Chloe heard the engine start, the tires squeal on the gravel, the sound fading down the road. She collapsed to the floor, hugging her belly, sobbing uncontrollably. How had things come to this? How had the man who once made her feel protected now make her feel like a prisoner? Chloe thought about calling someone, a friend maybe, but Ethan had isolated her so much that she barely had any friends left. She thought about calling her father, but the shame was too great. General Miller had always said she needed to be strong, that weakness was not tolerable. How could she tell him she had chosen wrong, that she was trapped in a relationship that was suffocating her? Then she thought about just leaving, grabbing Leo some clothes and running. But where to? She had no money of her own. Ethan controlled all the finances. She had no car, she had no support network, and she was 7 months pregnant with a 1-year-old in her arms. Where could she go? The day passed in a heavy silence. Chloe cared for Leo mechanically, feeding him, changing his diapers, playing with him, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy for her son. But with every noise from outside, she flinched. With every car that passed on the road, her heart raced. Ethan returned at dusk when the sun was already hiding behind the mountains and the cold was becoming even more biting. He came in without a word, went straight to the bedroom and closed the door. Chloe heard him on the phone again, his voice low and controlled. She prepared dinner in silence. Rice, beans, a roasted chicken. She set the table, hoping that maybe a family meal would calm things down. Ethan came out of the room, looked at the table, but didn't sit down. I'm not hungry, he said, grabbing another beer from the fridge. Chloe's stomach churned, but she forced herself to eat, knowing she needed to for the baby. After dinner, she gave Leo a bath, put him in his pajamas, and tried to get him to sleep. But the boy was restless, as if he could feel the tension in the air. He cried, wanted to be held, didn't want to stay in his crib. Chloe rocked him for hours, softly singing the lullabies her own mother used to sing to her. When she finally got Leo to sleep, it was past 11 at night. Chloe was exhausted. She went to the bathroom, washed her face, looked at herself in the mirror. She saw a woman she barely recognized. Dark circles under her eyes, a pale face, eyes swollen from crying. When was the last time she had truly smiled? She went back to the bedroom, lay down on the bed fully dressed, not daring to get close to Ethan, who was already lying on the other side, his back to her. The silence between them was deafening. Chloe closed her eyes, praying that the next day would be different, praying that Ethan would wake up and realize he was being manipulated, praying that whoever was planting these lies in his head would get tired and stop. But deep down, as sleep finally overcame her, a part of her knew this was just the beginning, that the storm approaching was bigger than anything she had ever had to face, and that when the cold mountain wind began to blow with all its force, she would need a courage she didn't yet know if she possessed. Outside, the temperature was plummeting. Snow was forecast for the next few days, a heavy blizzard, the kind that paralyzed the entire region. And as Chloe finally fell asleep, exhausted and scared, she had no idea that this would be the last calm night she would have for a long time, that the real ordeal was yet to come, and that when the dawn brought with it the most intense cold of the winter, it would also bring decisions that would change everything forever. The 3 days that followed were like walking on thin ice, each step a gamble that the ground wouldn't break completely. Chloe moved through the house in calculated silence, speaking only when necessary, avoiding any gesture that could be interpreted as a provocation. Every word was weighed before it left her mouth. Every movement was thought through twice. She had become a shadow in her own home, trying to take up as little space as possible, as if becoming invisible could protect her. Ethan oscillated between moments of frightening calm and sudden bursts of anger, triggered by trivial things. A pot making too much noise on the stove, Leo crying at the wrong time, interrupting a TV show, the television tuned to a channel he didn't approve of, the coffee made in a way that wasn't exactly how he liked it. Everything had become potentially dangerous, every object in the house a possible excuse for a confrontation. Chloe had learned to anticipate his moods by observing small signs, the way he closed the door when he came in, the sound of his footsteps, the way he threw his keys. Everything said something, and she had become an expert at reading those signs, at mentally preparing herself for what was to come. When he slammed the door, she knew she needed to keep her distance. When he came in silently, it was even worse, because it meant the anger was contained, simmering beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to explode. At night, she barely slept. She stayed alert, listening to every sound. The creak of the bed when Ethan moved, his breathing growing heavier when he was about to wake from a nightmare. The sound of the wind outside that sometimes sounded like voices. Her body was in a constant state of high alert, and it was starting to take its toll. Headaches that wouldn't go away. Tension in her shoulders that left her muscles hard as rock. The baby inside her moving restlessly, as if it too felt the adrenaline constantly coursing through its mother's veins. On the morning of the 4th day, Chloe woke up with the feeling that something had changed during the night. She couldn't explain exactly what it was, but there was a different quality to the air, like when you sense a storm before you even see the clouds. The air in the house was different, charged with a new electric tension. The walls seemed smaller, as if they were closing in on her. Ethan was already awake when she dragged herself out of the bedroom, each movement an effort against the bone-deep exhaustion. He was sitting at the kitchen table with his phone in hand, his back straight, his jaw clenched, typing messages with an intensity that made his fingers fly across the screen. The blue light from the device illuminated his face from below, creating shadows that made him look like someone she didn't know. When she entered the room, he didn't even look up. He just kept typing as if she didn't exist, as if she were just another piece of furniture. "Good morning," she said, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. "I'm going to make coffee. Do you want some?" Ethan continued typing for a few more seconds before answering. "Already had some. I left early and stopped at the gas station." Chloe nodded even though she knew he wasn't looking. She went to the stove, filled the kettle with water, and put it on to heat. Her movements were mechanical, automatic, the result of a daily routine. While she waited for the water to boil, she looked out the window at the frost-covered landscape. The weather forecast warned of an even more intense cold front approaching. Snow was expected in the coming days. A lot of snow. Ethan's phone rang, and he answered immediately, getting up and going into the bedroom. Chloe heard the door close, forcefully. She took the opportunity to check her own phone, which was on top of the refrigerator, where she had left it the night before. 3 unread messages, all from unknown numbers. She opened the first one with trembling hands. It was a short, direct message. "He knows everything. You better tell the truth before it's too late." The second was even more disturbing. "Do you really think he's going to believe you? He's already seen the proof. He already knows who you really are." The third made her blood run cold. "Think carefully about what you're doing, Chloe. Think about your children. Some decisions can't be undone." She quickly deleted the messages, her heart pounding erratically. Who was doing this? Who had her number? And why were they trying to destroy what little was left of her life? From the bedroom, she heard Ethan's voice change. He was speaking quietly, but there was an urgency in his tone that frightened her. Chloe couldn't make out the words, but the rhythm of the conversation suggested that someone was giving instructions, guidance, and Ethan was obeying. When he came out of the room 10 minutes later, he had a determination on his face she hadn't seen before. He grabbed the truck keys without a word, but stopped at the door, turning to face her. "I'm going to take care of a few things today," he said, his voice too controlled to be natural. "When I get back, you and I are going to have a serious talk, Chloe. And this time I want the whole truth, no lies, no excuses." She wanted to ask what he meant by that, wanted to demand he stop speaking in riddles, but some instinct made her just nod. Ethan left, and the sound of the truck driving away echoed through the silent valley. Chloe collapsed into a chair, hugging her belly. The baby moved, and she closed her eyes, trying to find strength from somewhere deep inside. She needed help. She couldn't do this alone anymore. But who could help her? She had no close friends left. Ethan had pushed them away one by one, always with plausible excuses. "She's a gossip. You shouldn't be friends with her. That one's always in trouble. She'll drag you down. The other one is jealous. She just wants to use you." She thought of her father, but the distance between them seemed insurmountable. How could she call General Miller and admit she had failed, that she had chosen wrong, that she needed to be rescued? He had raised her to be strong, independent, capable of solving her own problems. Calling him would be admitting weakness, and weakness was the one thing Arthur had never tolerated. There was one person left, Dr. Peterson, the doctor who was overseeing her pregnancy, a woman in her 50s, with grey hair always tied in a bun, and kind eyes that seemed to see past the lies patients told. At the last appointment, 3 weeks ago, Sarah had noticed something. Chloe was sure of it. She had noticed the bruises Chloe tried to hide with makeup. She had noticed how Chloe flinched when Ethan insisted on coming into the exam room with her. She had noticed the fear, but Sarah hadn't said anything in front of Ethan. She had just handed Chloe a card with a number handwritten on the back. "If you ever need to talk, you can call me any time," she had whispered, squeezing Chloe's hand with meaningful force. Chloe picked up her phone again and found the card in her wallet. It was there, folded between the dollar bills she had been secretly saving, one bill at a time whenever there was some change left from groceries. $5 here, 10 there, always hiding it from Ethan, who controlled every cent that came in and out of the house. It wasn't much, maybe $200 in total, but it was what she had, her only emergency fund, her only small rebellion against his absolute control. She dialed the number with trembling fingers and brought the phone to her ear, her heart beating so hard she was sure Ethan could hear it from the bedroom. It rang once, twice, 3 times. With each ring, Chloe's desperation grew. What if the doctor didn't answer? What if she had changed her mind about helping? On the 4th ring, a familiar voice finally answered, bringing a relief so immense that Chloe had to hold onto the wall to keep from collapsing. "Hello, Dr. Peterson speaking." "Doctor, it's Chloe." Chloe paused, her throat tightening, as if invisible hands were strangling her. The words wouldn't come out. "I need help. I really need help." There was a brief pause on the other end, and Then Sarah's voice became softer, closer, filled with a genuine concern that Chloe hadn't heard directed at her in so long. "Chloe, honey, where are you right now? Are you safe? Is he there with you?" "I'm at home. Ethan left, but he's coming back. I don't know when. It could be 10 minutes or 2 hours. He doesn't tell me anything anymore. I don't know what to do, doctor. Things are getting worse every day and I'm scared. I'm so scared of what might happen." "Listen carefully," Sarah said, and Chloe could hear her moving, probably grabbing keys, purse, getting ready to act. "Can you leave the house right now? Can you grab your things and come to my office? I can help you. I have contacts. I know safe places, but I need you to get here. Can you do that?" Chloe looked at Leo, who was playing on the living room floor with some plastic containers, making noise by stacking and knocking them over, oblivious to everything happening around him. So small, so innocent, so dependent on her for everything. "I have Leo, and I'm 7 months pregnant, doctor. I don't have a car. Ethan took the truck and I don't even know how to drive well. And even if I did, he hides the keys. He never lets me take it." Okay, Sarah replied, her voice firm and decisive, conveying a security that Chloe absorbed, like a plant absorbs water after weeks of drought. "Give me your exact address. I'm going to send someone to pick you up, someone I trust who has helped other women in your situation. But I need you to be ready when he gets there. Just take the essentials, understand? IDs, clothes for you and Leo, any medication you need. Take. Nothing sentimental that will weigh you down. Can you do that?" Chloe felt tears of relief stream down her face, wetting the old nightgown she was wearing. "I can. Yes, I can. I'll hurry." "Half an hour," Sarah said, and Chloe heard paper tearing, probably the doctor writing down the address. "There will be a blue car, an old but well-kept Ford Focus. The driver's name is Mr. Henderson. He's a trustworthy gentleman who helps me with these cases. He'll honk twice, very quickly. When you hear it, get out fast. Don't look back. Don't grab anything else. Just leave. Got it?" "I got it," Chloe replied, her voice breaking. "And doctor, I don't know how to thank you. I don't know how I'll pay for all this." "Don't thank me now, honey. And you don't have to pay for anything. Just be ready and stay safe until the car gets there. Can you do that for me?" "I can, I will." "Be brave, Chloe. You're stronger than you think. I'll see you soon." As soon as she hung up, Chloe sprang into action. She grabbed an old backpack she used for the hospital and started filling it with the essentials. Her and Leo's IDs, a few changes of clothes, diapers, bottles, Leo's birth certificate, her nursing degree, the hidden money, a photo of her with her mother, the only memento she had of the woman who had passed away when she was just 5. She was finishing packing the backpack, checking for the 3rd time that she had all the important documents, when she heard a sound from outside that made her freeze. It wasn't a horn. It was the unmistakable sound of Ethan's truck returning, the diesel engine making that deep rumble she had learned to recognize. From a distance, panic washed over her like ice water. He shouldn't be back so soon. He had been gone for less than 40 minutes. He shouldn't be here. Something had gone wrong. Something had changed his plans. Chloe ran to the window, her legs shaky, and peeked from behind the curtain. She saw the white F-150 parking in front of the house, kicking up a cloud of dust that shimmered in the morning light. But there was another vehicle right behind it, coming down the dirt road. A sleek black sedan, completely out of place in that rural setting. An expensive car, the kind you didn't see often in Pine Ridge, especially not in this more isolated area. Both doors opened at the same time, as if in a rehearsed choreography. Ethan got out of the truck with jerky movements, slamming the door hard. And from the black sedan, with a studied grace, emerged a woman who made Chloe instinctively step back from the window. She had never seen her before, she was absolutely sure of it, but something about her, something in the way she moved, the way she looked around made all of Chloe's instincts scream in alarm. The woman was beautiful, probably in her mid-30s, with that polished beauty that came from expensive salons and well-chosen clothes. Dark, straight hair fell over her shoulders like a silk curtain, her makeup flawless, even at that hour of the morning, dressed in an urban elegance that completely contrasted with the rural simplicity of Pine Ridge. Black dress pants, a grey silk blouse, high heels that sank slightly into the dirt as she walked. discreet but clearly expensive earrings, a leather handbag that probably cost more than Chloe earned in a month. But it wasn't her appearance that scared Chloe. It was the way she moved, too calculated. Nothing spontaneous, everything seemed thought out, measured. The way she looked around, her dark eyes scanning the property with an attention that didn't fit a simple visit. The way she smiled at Ethan, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, that had something predatory about it. There was something too artificial, too dangerous about that woman. Ethan and the woman were talking near the vehicles, and Chloe saw him point to the house, making gestures that seemed to be explaining something. The woman nodded, occasionally touching Ethan's arm with a familiarity that made Chloe's stomach turn. She quickly hid the backpack under the bed, picked Leo up and tried to look natural when the door opened. Ethan came in first, followed by the woman. He pointed at Chloe with a sharp gesture. "That's her," he said, as if presenting evidence in court. The woman smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "So, this is the famous Chloe. Ethan has told me so much about you." Chloe hugged Leo tighter. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" The woman extended her hand, a gesture that seemed polite but was laden with condescension. "Victoria, I'm a friend of Ethan's. He asked me to help him sort out some misunderstandings you two have been having." Chloe didn't take the offered hand. "Ethan, what is she talking about? What misunderstandings?" Ethan crossed his arms, leaning against the wall. "Victoria has access to some information that I think you'll want to see, Chloe. Information about your activities when you think no one is looking." Victoria opened her expensive handbag and took out an envelope. From it, she pulled out several photos printed on high-quality photographic paper. She began to place them on the table, one by one, like cards in a cruel game. Chloe approached, still holding Leo, and looked at the images. They were photos of her, yes. In several of them, she was talking to Dr. Evans, the doctor from the hospital. But the angles were all misleading, cropped to suggest an intimacy that wasn't there. One photo showed Dr. Evans touching her shoulder, but Chloe remembered that moment. She had been crying in the parking lot after losing a patient, and he had simply offered comfort. Another showed them laughing, but it had been during a conversation about a successful medical case. "This isn't what it looks like," Chloe said, her voice trembling. "These photos have been manipulated. The angles are all wrong." Victoria smiled again, that cold smile. "Of course you'd say that. It's what they all say when they're caught." Chloe turned to Ethan, desperate. "Do you really believe this? Do you really think I would cheat on you? Look at me, Ethan. Look at our family. Why would I do that?" "Because you always wanted more than I could give you," Ethan answered. And there was something in his words that sounded rehearsed, as if Victoria had planted those phrases in his mind. "You always thought you deserved better. A doctor, maybe, someone with more money, more education." "That's not true," Chloe yelled, startling Leo, who began to cry. "I never, ever said that. I chose you, Ethan. I chose to build a life with you." Victoria intervened, her voice soft but venomous. "You know, Chloe, I understand your position. It must be hard to keep up appearances when the truth is so clear. But why not make things easier for everyone? Admit what you did. Admit that the baby you're carrying might not be Ethan's. At least then you can both move on with honesty." Chloe felt the world spin around her. How dare this woman, this stranger, come into her home and accuse her of such horrible things? Who did she think she was? "You don't know me," Chloe said, her voice low but firm. "You don't know anything about me, about my life, about my marriage. You have no right to come here and make accusations." Victoria shrugged, putting the photos back in the envelope. "I'm just trying to help Ethan see reality. He deserves to know the truth. He deserves to know if he's raising a child that's really his." Ethan, who had remained silent during the exchange, finally spoke. "Victoria is right. I need to be sure. We're going to do a DNA test as soon as the baby is born." Chloe shook her head, incredulous. "And until then? What's going to happen until then? Are you going to keep treating me like a criminal in my own home?" Victoria touched Ethan's arm again, that possessive gesture Chloe was beginning to recognize. "Ethan, can I speak with you outside for a moment? They went out, leaving Chloe alone in the living room with Leo, who was still crying softly against her shoulder. She went to the window and saw them talking near the cars. Victoria was gesturing a lot, talking quickly, and Ethan was nodding, agreeing with whatever she was saying. It was then that Chloe noticed something that made her step back. Victoria's hand moved, and for a brief second Chloe saw a phone in her palm. The screen was lit, showing what looked like a list of messages. Messages that Victoria was reading to Ethan, messages that Chloe was almost certain were fake. This woman wasn't just a friend trying to help, she was the source of everything. She was the one destroying their relationship, message by message, photo by photo, lie by lie. But why? What did Victoria gain from this? When Ethan came back inside, he was alone. Victoria was already in her car, waving from the window before driving off. Ethan closed the door and turned to Chloe. His expression was unreadable. "Victoria opened my eyes to a lot of things today," he said, his voice strangely calm. "She made me realize that maybe I've been too soft on you, too tolerant." Chloe took a step back. "Ethan, please. This woman is lying. I don't know why, I don't know what she wants, but she's manipulating you." He laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "It's funny how you always have excuses, always have explanations. But you know what I think? I think you're exactly what Victoria said you were, a liar, a cheater." The words fell on Chloe like stones. She hugged Leo tighter, feeling the weight of the situation crush her. She had to get out of there. She had to grab the backpack and run when Dr. Peterson's car arrived. But how much time did she have? Half an hour, the doctor had said. 20 minutes had already passed since the call. Ethan walked to the fridge and grabbed another beer. "Just 10 more days until the snow really hits," he said, looking out the window. "They'll close the roads. We'll be snowed in here for a while, just me, you, and the truth, Chloe. No distractions, no lies. It'll be a good opportunity for you to finally be honest with me." Chloe felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold outside. The idea of being trapped there, snowed in with no possibility of escape, was terrifying. She had to leave before that. She had to leave now. "I'm going to put Leo down for a nap," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He's tired." Ethan nodded, already absorbed in his phone again. Chloe took Leo to the bedroom, closed the door carefully, and grabbed the backpack from under the bed. She put it on, picked Leo up, and waited, her heart pounding so loudly she was sure Ethan could hear it from the other side of the door. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Then finally she heard it. 2 short honks from the road, Dr. Peterson's car. Chloe didn't think, she just acted. She opened the bedroom door silently and saw that Ethan was in the bathroom. She heard the toilet flush, the faucet turn on. She had seconds, just seconds. She ran to the front door, opened it carefully, and stepped out into the biting cold. The blue Ford Focus was waiting on the road, engine running. A man in his 60s was at the wheel, waving urgently for her to come. Chloe ran, each step a struggle against the weight of her pregnancy, against the weight of Leo in her arms. She was halfway to the car when she heard Ethan's voice yelling behind her. "Chloe, where do you think you're going?" She didn't look back. She just ran faster. She reached the car, opened the back door, and practically threw herself inside, placing Leo on the seat. The driver sped off before she had even fully closed the door. In the rearview mirror, Chloe saw Ethan running after them, yelling something she couldn't hear. But the car was fast, and soon they turned a corner, and the house disappeared from view. Only then did Chloe allow herself to cry. She cried from relief, from fear, from exhaustion. Leo, frightened by everything, cried too. The driver said nothing, just drove with determination along the winding road. "Dr. Peterson said to tell you you're going to a safe place," he finally said, his voice kind. "A shelter she knows. There are other women there who have been through what you're going through. You're not alone." Chloe nodded, unable to form words. She looked out the window and saw Pine Ridge receding, the mountains covered in mist, the sky heavy with the promise of snow. She was leaving behind the only life she had known for the past 2 years. She was running away, but running away, she realized, was sometimes the bravest form of fighting. The car continued down the road, and Chloe closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of quiet. She didn't know what lay ahead. She didn't know how Ethan would react, what Victoria would do, how she would survive with 2 children and no resources. But for now, in that moment, she was safe. And safety, even if temporary, was more than she had had in a very long time. As the car descended the mountain pass, Chloe thought of her father, General Miller, of everything he had taught her about strength and discipline. Maybe he was right about some things. Maybe strength really was necessary, but not the strength to endure the unbearable. The strength to know when it was time to retreat, regroup, and plan the next move. The strength to choose survival over pride. She hugged Leo tighter, felt the baby move inside her, and made a silent promise. She would protect them. No matter what she had to do, no matter what it cost, her children would not grow up in fear. They would not grow up thinking that love meant pain, and if ensuring that meant facing Ethan, facing Victoria, even facing her own past, then so be it. The road stretched ahead, unknown and frightening, but Chloe kept going because it was the only direction possible, and sometimes moving forward was all a woman could do when the world around her insisted on falling apart. The shelter was on a quiet street in Boulder, about 2 hours from Pine Ridge. It was a large, old house painted a yellow faded by time and the cold mountain wind, with bars on the windows that could have passed for decoration, if not for the weight they carried, the silent message they conveyed: protection, safety, necessity. A small sign on the door simply read, "St. Clair's Welcome Center," with no further details, no phone numbers, no full address. It didn't draw attention. That was precisely the point, Mr. Henderson explained as he parked the blue Ford Focus in front of the iron gate. A place invisible to those who didn't know it existed, to those who didn't need to know, but one that saved lives every day. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Over the years. Chloe got out of the car with Leo in her arms, her legs still trembling from the adrenaline of the escape, her muscles tense from being on high alert for so long. The boy had finally stopped crying and was now sleeping against her shoulder, exhausted from so much fear, from not understanding what was happening. His breath was warm against her neck, and Chloe clung to that contact like someone clinging to a life raft in the middle of the ocean. She adjusted the backpack on her shoulders, feeling the weight not just of clothes and documents, but of everything she had left behind. A whole life condensed into a few pounds of belongings, everything that mattered and nothing that mattered at the same time. The front yard had trampled grass and a few scattered toys, an old but still functional slide, a seesaw that creaked in the wind, signs that children lived here, that there was life here, despite the pain that brought people to this place. The door opened before they even rang the bell, as if someone had been waiting, watching from the window. A woman in her 50s appeared, her grey hair tied in a loose ponytail, wearing a floral apron over simple clothes. There was nothing extraordinary about her appearance, nothing that drew attention, but there was something in her eyes that Chloe recognized immediately: genuine kindness. Her face was marked by wrinkles that seemed to have been carved more by smiles than by worries, though she had surely seen more suffering than most people could imagine. "Chloe, welcome," she said, her voice as soft as a hug you didn't know you needed until you received it. "I'm Sister Margaret. Dr. Peterson called me a couple of hours ago, told me about your situation. Come in, please. Come in and get out of the cold. You're safe now, completely safe." Those last words, spoken with such conviction, such certainty, made something inside Chloe shatter and rebuild itself at the same time. You're safe now, completely safe. When was the last time she had felt safe? When was the last time someone had said that to her, and she had actually believed it, without that inner voice questioning, without that residual fear that it was a lie? The tears came without warning, silent but intense, streaming down her face as she entered the house that smelled of fresh coffee and homemade bread, of rosemary and lavender, of cleanliness and care. The inside of the house was surprisingly cozy. Chloe had expected something institutional, cold, impersonal, but this felt more like a grandmother's house than a shelter. There were embroidered doilies on the furniture, colorful pillows on the sofas, curtains that someone had clearly sewn by hand with love and patience. Sister Margaret led her to a welcoming living room, with worn but clean sofas, plants in the windows and photographs of smiling children on the walls. "Sit here, dear. I'll get you some tea. You must be freezing from the trip." Chloe let herself sink into the sofa, still holding Leo, who was starting to wake up. The boy opened his eyes slowly, disoriented, looking around with the typical confusion of someone who falls asleep in one place and wakes up in another, entirely different one. "Mommy," he murmured, his voice still thick with sleep. "Where's home?" "We're in a new place, sweetie," Chloe said, kissing his forehead. "A safe place. You're going to like it here." Leo didn't seem convinced, but he accepted the explanation with the simplicity of a small child. Sister Margaret returned with a tray containing not just tea, but also cookies, fruit, and a glass of milk for Leo. "Eat something. We can talk later." Chloe hadn't realized how hungry she was until she saw the food. She couldn't remember the last time she had eaten something that wasn't prepared in a hurry, between one of Leo's cries and one of Ethan's outbursts. She ate slowly, savoring each bite of cookie as if it were the most precious thing in the world. When she finished, Sister Margaret sat across from her. "Chloe, you don't have to. Tell me anything right now if you don't want to. I know you're tired, scared, but I need you to know a few things about how it works here. Can you listen?" Chloe nodded, adjusting Leo on her lap as the boy nibbled on a cookie. "This is a shelter for women in vulnerable situations. We have 8 rooms and right now they're all occupied, including the one we're giving you. You'll be sharing with another woman, Jessica, and her 3-year-old daughter. It's temporary until we can find something better for you. We have rules here, but nothing too complicated. You can't give the address to anyone. You can't go out alone for the first few days. You can't have visitors without permission. All of this is for your safety. Do you understand?" "I understand," Chloe said, her voice still weak. "Tomorrow morning the social worker will come talk to you. She'll help you organize your documents, file for a restraining order if you want, and seek support from the legal system. For now you just need to rest. I'll show you to your room." The room was small but cozy. 2 twin beds, a crib against the wall, and old wooden wardrobe. The walls were painted a light blue, with children's drawings that someone had made with care. A window looked out onto a small backyard, where Chloe could see other children playing, supervised by a young woman. "Jessica should be back soon," Sister Margaret explained. "She works part-time at a nearby bakery. We got her that job last month. Her daughter goes to a daycare we have an agreement with. If you want, we can try to get a spot for Leo, too." Chloe could barely process it all. There was so much kindness in this place, so much structure to help women like her, that it seemed unreal. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for everything." Sister Margaret squeezed her hand. "Rest now. If you need anything, just call me. I'm always around." When she was alone, Chloe lay down on one of the beds with Leo beside her. The boy, soothed by his mother's presence and a full belly, soon fell asleep again. Chloe watched him, memorizing every detail of his relaxed face. She touched her own belly, feeling the baby move. "Grace," she whispered, "you're going to be born safely, I promise." But even there, in that protected place, Chloe couldn't completely switch off. Her mind kept going back to Ethan. What was he doing now? How had he reacted when he realized she had run away? Was he looking for her? And Victoria, that strange woman who had appeared like a snake, what did she really want? While Chloe struggled to sleep in Boulder, finally surrendering to her accumulated exhaustion, 200 miles away, in an elegant office on the 10th floor of a commercial building in downtown Denver, Victoria Monroe hung up a call and smiled to herself. It was a smile no one would see, a genuine smile, unlike the calculated ones she used in public. Everything was going according to plan, even better than she had hoped when she started this game months ago. She rose from her Italian leather chair, the one she had bought when she closed her first big deal, and walked to the panoramic window that took up the entire west wall of the office. She watched the city spread out below her, the lights beginning to twinkle as night fell over Denver. The city at night was beautiful, she thought, as she always did at this time, full of lights and possibilities and people who had no idea of the games being played above their heads. Victoria had always loved this view, always loved the feeling of being above it all, looking down, in absolute control of the pieces on the board. That's how she saw people. Pieces. Some more valuable than others, some easier to manipulate, but all movable if you knew where and how to apply pressure. She picked up her phone and scrolled through the messages she had exchanged with Ethan over the past few weeks. Dozens of them, hundreds if she counted, from the beginning. Each one carefully crafted to plant specific doubts, feed existing insecurities, and destroy his relationship from the inside out, like dismantling a delicate mechanism, piece by piece. It was a craft, almost an art, and Victoria, she had to admit, was a master at it. She had learned early on that the right words at the right time could build or destroy empires. She had always preferred destruction. It was more profitable. Ethan Hayes wasn't just a project for her. He was the key to something much bigger, something she had been pursuing for almost 5 years, ever since she had stumbled upon an interesting detail in his military past. Ethan had been involved in a classified operation in 2019 on the US-Mexico border, an operation that never appeared in official records, but which Victoria had discovered through contacts she maintained in the information underworld. In that operation, sensitive military equipment had disappeared, encrypted communication devices of immense strategic value. The case had been covered up, filed away, buried under layers of bureaucracy and military secrecy. But Victoria knew that equipment still existed somewhere, and she was almost certain that Ethan knew where. Not that he had stolen it. Victoria had done her research. Ethan was too much of a soldier for that, too honest, too dumb. But he had been there when it all happened. He knew the men involved. He had information he didn't know he had, and Victoria needed that information. The problem was that Ethan, though emotionally unstable, still had some barriers. He still had some sense of loyalty, some remnant of military discipline. Victoria needed to break him completely. She needed to reduce him to nothing, until he was so desperate, so confused, so dependent on her, that he would tell her everything, absolutely everything. Chloe had been just a tool in this process, destroying Ethan's relationship, isolating him, making him lose the only stable thing in his life, was part of the plan, and it was working better than Victoria had imagined. Ethan was almost at the right point. A few more pushes and he would break completely. Her phone rang. It was him. Victoria waited 3 rings before answering, always maintaining that calculated distance that made people anxious. "Hello, Ethan." His voice on the other end was agitated, almost desperate. "She ran. Chloe. She took the kid and ran. I don't know where. She's not answering her phone. She's gone." Victoria feigned concern in her voice. "My God, Ethan. This proves what I've been telling you. An innocent woman doesn't run. She's hiding something. She probably went to meet her lover." "No, it can't be. She was scared. I saw it in her eyes. She was scared of me." Victoria sighed dramatically. "Ethan, listen. You're confused. It's natural. You've been betrayed, manipulated. But you need to keep a cool head. You need to think strategically, like you would in a military operation." She could hear his heavy breathing on the other end. "What do you mean?" "Think with me. She ran, okay, but she's pregnant, with a small child and no money. She can't have gone far. She must be in some shelter, some place that takes in women in her situation. How many places like that are there in the region?" Ethan was silent, processing. "I don't know, a few, I guess." "So we'll find out. We'll call every one of them. We'll find her. And when we do, you can have the conversation you need to have. You can demand explanations. You can find out the truth about this baby she's carrying." "I don't know if that's a good idea," Ethan said, but his voice had less certainty. It was already giving way. "Maybe I should give her some time. Let her calm down." Victoria felt a flash of irritation, but controlled her tone. "Ethan, listen to what you're saying. You're letting her call the shots. You're being passive. Is that what you want, to keep being manipulated?" "No," he replied, his voice growing firmer. "No, I deserve answers." "Exactly, you do, and I'm going to help you get them. Do you trust me?" A pause. Then, "I trust you." Victoria smiled. "Good. We'll start looking tomorrow. For now, try to rest. You're going to need your energy." When she hung up, Victoria returned to the window. Everything was falling into place perfectly. Ethan was exactly where she wanted him. Dependent, confused, willing to do whatever she suggested. Soon he would be broken enough to tell her everything about that operation. And then Victoria would have what she needed to negotiate with the right people to sell the information to the highest bidder. But there was one variable she hadn't accounted for. General Miller. Victoria had done her research on him too when she found out he was Chloe's father. A military legend, retired but still influential, with connections that stretched from Washington, D.C. to overseas. A man who, if he found out what was happening to his daughter, could become a problem. But Victoria wasn't worried. Arthur and Chloe were estranged. The general didn't even know where his daughter lived, who she was with. Victoria had checked, and even if he did, men like Arthur had too much pride to get involved in domestic issues. They would see it as their daughter's weakness, as something she should handle on her own. No, the general was not a threat, at least not yet. Back in Boulder, Chloe had finally fallen asleep, exhausted. She dreamed of her childhood home, of her father in his impeccable uniform, of the mother she barely remembered. She dreamed of simpler days, when the world had clear rules and she still believed that following those rules would keep her safe. She woke up to Leo poking her face. "Mommy, hungry?" The sun was already high when she checked the clock. 10 in the morning. She had slept for almost 12 hours straight, a luxury she hadn't allowed herself in months. She got up, still dizzy, and straightened her wrinkled clothes. The bed on the other side of the room was now occupied. A woman was sleeping there, curled up in a blanket, her blonde hair spread over the pillow. It must be Jessica. Chloe decided not to wake her. She picked Leo up and left the room quietly. The house was alive with morning activity. Children running down the hallways, women talking in the kitchen, the smell of coffee and bread making everything even more welcoming. Sister Margaret was at the main table, serving breakfast to several people. "Good morning, dear," she said when she saw Chloe. "Did you sleep well?" "Better than I expected," Chloe admitted. "Thank you for everything. Sit here. I'll introduce you to the girls." Over breakfast, Chloe met the other women living there, each with her own story, each with her own wounds, some still open, others beginning to heal. Patricia, a brunette in her 30s with tired but determined eyes, who had fled her police officer husband after 15 years of abuse that started subtly, with criticism and control, and ended brutally with hospitalization and constant fear. Now, she worked as a cook in a restaurant and was saving money to rent her own place for herself and her 2 children. Amanda, a blonde with short hair, was 25 but looked 40 from all she had lived through. She had escaped with 3 children after her partner, in a fit of rage during an argument about money, tried to throw her from the 2nd-floor balcony of their apartment building. The neighbors intervened, called the police, and she had used that moment of chaos to grab the kids and run. Now she crocheted and sold her pieces online, a small but honest income she had built from scratch, stitch by stitch, just as she was rebuilding her own life. Isabella, the youngest of the group, was only 22 and 5 months pregnant. She had discovered that her boyfriend was systematically drugging her, putting substances in her food and drinks to make her drowsy and confused, while he accessed her bank accounts and stole from her little by little. By the time she realized what was happening, she had lost almost everything she had. But she hadn't lost the baby and she hadn't lost herself, and that was what mattered. Now, different stories in detail, but with common threads weaving a tapestry of survival, fear, betrayal, the impossible courage to start over when everything inside you screams to give up, and above all, the fierce determination to protect their children, to ensure they wouldn't grow up repeating the same patterns, living the same fears. Later, the social worker arrived, a woman in her 40s, serious but kind, who introduced herself as Cecilia. They talked for over 2 hours. Chloe told her everything: the accusations, the control, the growing fear, the threatening messages, Victoria's appearance. Cecilia took meticulous notes. "We're going to file for a restraining order today," she said, "and I'm going to activate the protection network. If this Ethan or this Victoria try to find you, they'll have to go through several legal barriers first." Chloe felt immense relief, but also a residual guilt. Ethan hadn't always been like this. There was a time when he was good to her. Was she exaggerating? Should she have tried harder? Cecilia, as if reading her thoughts, touched her hand. Chloe, nothing you did or didn't do justifies what was done to you. Nothing. Do you understand that? Chloe nodded, but the tears came anyway. A lifetime of being strong, of not crying, of enduring, crumbling there in that simple room with a woman she barely knew but who understood. Meanwhile, in Denver, a call was being made. A call that would change everything. General Miller was in his study, as he was every afternoon since he had retired 3 years ago, reading military reports and strategic updates that he still received through discreet channels, contacts he maintained purely through the force of respect accumulated over decades of service. Retired didn't mean disconnected, not for men like him. He still had. His fingers in many operations were still consulted discreetly by officers facing complex dilemmas who needed the wisdom of someone who had seen and done it all. The room was an extension of who he was. Walls covered with books on strategy, military history, geopolitics, framed maps of operations he had participated in, photographs with presidents, secretaries, generals from other countries, medals in glass frames, a lifetime dedicated to service, to duty, to country. But there, on that winter afternoon as he read about troop movements on some distant border, none of it really mattered. Because his real life, his only daughter was in danger, and he knew nothing about it. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts, an unknown number flashing on the screen. Arthur normally didn't answer such calls. He had strict filters, a secretary who screened everything. But something, some instinct sharpened by years of life-or-death decisions made him answer this time. "Hello," he said, his voice still carrying that tone of command that had never completely left him. On the other end, a male voice, hesitant but determined. "General Miller, my name is David Evans. I'm a doctor at Pine Ridge Regional Hospital. I know this. Call is unexpected, but I need to speak with you about your daughter, Chloe. It's urgent." Arthur sat up straighter in his leather armchair, his entire body on alert. "Chloe? What happened? Is she all right?" "Sir, she's physically fine as far as I know. But her situation is delicate, very delicate, and I'm sure you need to know what's happening." David told him everything he knew. The conversations he'd had with Chloe in the hospital hallways, how he'd noticed bruises she tried to hide, how she seemed increasingly scared, more isolated, how her partner had shown, up at the hospital once, making a jealous scene, accusing David of absurd things, how he had tried to help but Chloe always refused, saying she could handle it on her own. "And today," David continued, "I received a call from Dr. Peterson, who's overseeing her pregnancy. It seems Chloe has run away. She's in a shelter, 7 months pregnant with a small child, and this man, this Ethan, is looking for her. I thought you should know." The silence that followed was long and heavy. When Arthur finally spoke, his voice was different, lower, more dangerous. "Where is she? Exactly?" David hesitated. "I can't give you that information, sir, but I can give you Dr. Peterson's contact information. She can decide whether or not to pass it on to you." Arthur wrote down the number, thanked him curtly, and hung up. He sat in silence for long minutes processing the information. His daughter, his only daughter, pregnant, scared, fleeing from a violent man, and he knew nothing, had done nothing. The failure was his. He saw it now with painful clarity. Arthur had failed not when Chloe needed him, but long before. He had failed when he raised her, under such rigid rules that she was afraid to ask for help. He had failed when he pushed her away for choosing a different path. He had failed when he let pride speak louder than love. But failures could be corrected. And General Miller hadn't gotten where he was by leaving problems unsolved. He picked up the phone again and made a series of calls. To Colonel Davis, who owed him favors from an operation in 2015. To Major Thompson, a specialist in location and tracking. To Lieutenant Baker, who worked in intelligence and had access to databases that officially didn't exist. In 2 hours, Arthur knew exactly where Chloe was. He knew which shelter, which room, who she was sharing it with. He knew everything about Ethan Hayes, his military record, his operations, his weaknesses, and he knew about Victoria Monroe too. Who she was, what she did, why she was involved. The puzzle came together quickly in the general's strategic mind. Victoria wasn't interested in Chloe. She was interested in Ethan. And Ethan had information about an operation that Arthur knew very well, because he had been the one to coordinate the cover-up when it all went wrong. The missing equipment. Arthur had always known where it was, always known who had it, and he had always kept it a secret because revealing it would put lives at risk, destabilize sensitive structures. But now Victoria was digging in that direction, and using his daughter as a tool. This could not continue. Arthur picked up the phone one more time and made a call he hadn't made in 5 years, to a number that few knew, a number that activated protocols that few knew existed. The voice on the other end answered on the first ring. "General, I wasn't expecting your call." "Emergency situation," Arthur said, his voice returning to that command tone he hadn't used in years. "Family in danger. I need full tactical support. Discreet but effective mobilization. Starting now." There was a brief pause, then, "How many men?" "6 will be sufficient. 2 for direct protection, 4 for threat containment. Full briefing in 2 hours. "Understood, General. We're on our way." When he hung up, Arthur stood and walked to the closet where he kept things he hadn't opened in years. Inside, perfectly preserved, was his uniform, his medals, and in the back, in a sealed box, a pistol he had carried on dozens of operations. He didn't plan to use it, but he was going to take it, because this time it wasn't about military strategy or a national mission, it was about his daughter, and for her, Arthur was willing to break every rule he had once sworn to protect. The storm that was now forming was no longer just about Chloe and Ethan. It involved forces that neither of them imagined, and when they collided, nothing would remain the same. In Boulder, oblivious to all this, Chloe was rocking Leo to sleep, singing softly. Grace moved inside her, and Chloe smiled, feeling for the first time in months something that resembled hope. Tomorrow would be a new day, and maybe, just maybe, things would start to get better. She had no way of knowing that the real battle was just beginning. The snow began to fall in the early hours of the 5th day, just as the weather forecast had been insisting with growing urgency all week. It wasn't a gentle, romantic snow, the kind people photograph and post on social media, with filters that make everything look more magical. It was a real severe blizzard, the kind that only happens once or twice a decade, the kind that paralyzes entire cities and turns roads into deadly traps. In Pine Ridge, the temperature plummeted to 17 degrees, and the wind howled like a wounded creature, hurling ice crystals against windows and doors, making old structures groan under the pressure. The trees bent dangerously, branches snapping with sounds that echoed through the mountains like distant gunshots. Chloe woke up in the shelter in Boulder at 5 in the morning, jolted from sleep by a nightmare where she was running through the snow with Leo in her arms, and Grace being born prematurely while she tried to find shelter. She woke up sweating despite the cold seeping through the cracks in the windows. She got up carefully so as not to wake Jessica, who was sleeping in the next bed with the soft sound of deep breathing, and went to the window barefoot on the cold wooden floor. She pulled back the curtain with trembling fingers and looked outside. The world was white, completely white. The snow already covered the streets, with a layer that must have been about 8 inches deep, and it was still falling hard, relentlessly, as if the sky had decided to dump its entire contents at once. Cars parked on the street looked like unrecognizable white mounds. There wasn't a living soul out there. No one would be crazy enough to go out in this weather. Leo was still asleep, wrapped in his blanket like a small cocoon. Chloe touched her own belly, feeling Grace move. 3 more weeks, she thought. Just 3 more weeks until she's born. I just need to keep everyone safe for 3 more weeks. But fate, as Chloe would learn that day, doesn't wait for convenient schedules. As she watched the snow fall in Boulder, her body tense with an anxiety she couldn't name, 125 miles away, on a secondary road covered in ice near Pine Ridge, 3 vehicles advanced with dangerous determination, despite the adverse conditions that would make any sensible driver stop and wait. One of them was Ethan's white pickup, with him at the wheel, his eyes fixed on the road he could barely see through the snow that the windshield wipers fought uselessly to clear, his jaw clenched with the tension that had become permanent on his face in recent weeks. Beside him in the passenger seat, Victoria talked non-stop, her voice a constant poisonous presence that seeped into his mind like toxic smoke. She seemed immune to the danger of the road, immune to the cold, immune to everything except her own obsession. "She's in Boulder, I'm sure of it," Victoria said for the third time in 20 minutes, checking her phone even though she knew the signal was weak, intermittent. "I managed to trace some calls she made. I have contacts who owe me favors. She must be in one of those women's shelters. She couldn't have gone far, not in her condition. Pregnant, with a small child, no money. She's trapped, Ethan, trapped and waiting for you to come get her. Probably regretting she ever ran." Ethan didn't answer, focused on keeping the vehicle on the road, but also because his mind was too fragmented to form coherent sentences. Pieces of anger mixed with confusion, with a strange longing for Chloe that he couldn't explain even to himself, with the growing feeling that he was doing something terribly wrong, but no longer knew how to stop, how to reverse everything that had already happened. Behind, Ethan's truck, maintaining a safe distance, followed a black SUV with tinted windows. Inside, two men with watchful eyes observed every move of the vehicle ahead. They were Sergeant Cole and Corporal Reynolds, special operations veterans, now doing a favor for General Miller. Protecting his daughter meant first neutralizing the threats, and Ethan Hayes was definitely a threat. And even further back, in a third vehicle, a discreet grey sedan, followed General Miller himself, accompanied by Colonel Davis. Arthur wasn't in uniform, but he carried with him the authority of decades of command. His eyes, trained to assess battlefields, now assessed the treacherous road and the man who threatened his daughter. "He's not getting near her," Arthur said, his voice low but firm. "Not him. Not the woman who's pulling the strings. This ends today." Davis nodded. "The team in Boulder is already in position. 2 men inside the shelter, 4 on the perimeter. If he tries anything, he won't even make it past the gate." The blizzard intensified as they drove on, but none of the vehicles slowed down. It was as if they all knew this was the final moment, that everything that had been building for the past few weeks would converge here, on this brutal winter day. At the shelter, Chloe was having breakfast with the other women when Sister Margaret entered the room with a serious expression. "Chloe, I need to speak with you, in private." Chloe's heart raced. Did something happen? Sister Margaret led her to a small office at the back of the house. Inside, 2 men were waiting, one older, with grey hair and an unmistakable military posture, the other younger, but with the same air of discipline. "Chloe, I'm Colonel Davis," the older man said. "I was sent by your father, General Miller. He's on his way, but he asked me to come ahead to ensure your safety." Chloe felt the floor drop out from under her. "My father? How does he know where I am?" "A doctor named David Evans contacted him, explained the situation. The general mobilized resources immediately and just in time. We have information that Ethan Hayes is on his way here. He tracked you somehow. He's with a woman named Victoria Monroe." Chloe's legs gave out and she had to sit down. "They're coming here now?" "Yes, but don't worry, we have men in position. They won't get past us. You and your son are protected." Chloe hugged her belly, feeling the light contractions that had been coming and going for the past few hours. Stress, she had thought. Just stress. But now the contractions seemed more regular, more intense. Sister Margaret, noticing her discomfort, came closer. "Dear, are you all right?" "I think so. Just some contractions, nothing major." "How frequent?" Sister Margaret asked, her concern evident. "I don't know. Every 20 minutes, maybe." Sister Margaret and the Colonel exchanged glances. "I'm calling Dr. Peterson," Margaret said. "Better to have a doctor here just in case." While this was unfolding at the shelter, Ethan's truck finally reached Boulder. Victoria was checking her phone, giving directions. "It's here, 3rd Street on the right. It should be the yellow house at the end of the block." Ethan turned as instructed, and then he saw it. The shelter. The discreet sign. The bars on the windows. His stomach churned. What was he doing? Was he really chasing Chloe, pregnant and scared, to a shelter for women in danger. Victoria, sensing his hesitation, placed a hand on his arm. "Ethan, focus. You came all this way. You can't give up now. You deserve answers. You deserve the truth." But looking at that house, at that place that existed because men like him did terrible things, Ethan felt something break inside him. For the first time in weeks, the fog in his mind began to clear. What would Chloe be doing in a place like this if he hadn't given her reasons to run? He parked the truck a few yards from the gate, his hands trembling on the steering wheel. "I can't do this," he said, his voice breaking. "I can't." Victoria hadn't expected this. Her plan depended on Ethan being brittle enough to push forward, to create a scene, to make Chloe reveal things in desperation that Victoria could use. She hadn't expected him to regain some sense at this critical moment. "Ethan, don't be weak now," she pressed, her voice losing some of its manipulative softness. "You came all this way. Finish what you started." But Ethan was already getting out of the truck. "I need to talk to her. Alone. You stay here." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, but Ethan was already walking toward the gate. That's when the two men emerged from the shadows. Cole and Reynolds, strategically positioned, blocked his path. "One more step and we have a problem," Cole said, his voice calm but filled with absolute authority. Ethan stopped, confused. "Who are you?" "We're the ones who are going to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life," Reynolds replied. "Turn around and go back to your truck, now." Ethan looked at the shelter, at the windows where he knew Chloe was. "I just want to talk to her. Please, I just want to apologize." That's when the shelter door opened and General Miller came out, followed by Colonel Davis. The sight of the general made Ethan instinctively step back. He knew that man, not personally but by reputation. Everyone in the armed forces knew General Miller. "You're Ethan Hayes," Arthur said, not as a question but as a statement. "Former soldier. Participated in Operation Green Frontier in 2019. Ethan nodded, unable to speak. "You terrorized my daughter," Arthur continued, his voice low but sharp as a blade. "You made a pregnant woman flee in the cold. You scared my grandson. And now you're here thinking you can just apologize and everything will be fine." "I didn't know she was your daughter," Ethan mumbled, and then realized how stupid that sounded. "I mean, I know that doesn't change anything. I know I did terrible things. I was just confused. That woman, she kept saying things, showing me pictures, making me believe that my daughter was cheating on you," Arthur completed. "Did you really believe that, soldier? Or did you want to believe it, because it gave you an excuse for what you were already doing?" The truth of those words hit Ethan like a punch. He staggered back, his legs weak. Inside the truck, Victoria watched everything with growing frustration. Things were not going as planned. Ethan was caving, crumbling. And those men, who were they? Where had they come from? She grabbed her phone, considering her options. She could run now, leave Ethan behind, cut her losses. But years of work, of investigation, of careful manipulation would be lost. The equipment, the information worth millions, all slipping through her fingers. That's when she saw the fourth vehicle arriving. A police car, sirens off, but lights flashing. Victoria felt panic for the first time in years. Someone had called the police. Someone knew more than they should. She got out of the truck, trying to look calm, controlled. She approached the general with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "General Miller, I presume. I'm Victoria Monroe. There's a misunderstanding here. I was just trying to help Ethan to—" "Help Ethan do what?" Arthur interrupted. "Destroy his relationship? Isolate him? Manipulate him to get information about classified military operations?" Victoria's smile faltered. "I don't know what you're talking about." Arthur took a step forward. "Operation Green Frontier 2019, encrypted communication equipment that went missing. You've been investigating this for 5 years. You thought Ethan knew where it was? You thought you could break him psychologically until he told you." Victoria backed away, her mask finally falling. "You can't prove any of this." "I don't have to," Arthur said. "They will." The police officers got out of their car. One of them approached Victoria with a warrant. Victoria Monroe, you are under arrest for investigation of crimes against national security, manipulation, and making threats. Anything you say can and will be used against you. As they handcuffed Victoria, she looked at Ethan with pure hatred. Idiot, she spat. You could have been useful. You could have gotten something out of this, but you're too weak, too stupid. Ethan didn't answer. He just watched as they took her away. Then he turned to Arthur. Can I see her? Chloe? I know I don't deserve it, but I need to apologize for real. Arthur studied him for a long moment. She's inside, but I won't force her to do anything. If she wants to see you, it's her choice. If she doesn't, you will respect that, and you will leave. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir. Inside the shelter, Chloe was lying on a sofa. Dr. Peterson beside her monitoring. The contractions. Sister Margaret, are you sure you don't want to go to the hospital? Sarah was asking. The contractions are getting closer. I don't want to leave, Chloe said, gripping the doctor's hand. I feel safe here. Please, if it's possible, let me stay. Sarah hesitated but nodded. All right, but if things progress too quickly, we'll have to go. Deal? That's when Arthur walked in, and for the first time in 3 years, father and daughter looked each other in the eye. Chloe felt the tears come immediately. Dad? Arthur crossed the room in swift strides and knelt, beside her taking her free hand. Daughter, my daughter, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry for everything. For not being here, for not noticing, for failing you. Chloe sobbed, years of hurt and love mixed together coming out at once. You didn't fail, Dad. I'm the one who didn't reach out. I was ashamed. I thought you would judge me. Never, Arthur said, his voice breaking for the first time in decades. Never, Chloe. You're my daughter, my pride, my joy. I failed to show you that, but it's the truth, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it. Up to you. A stronger contraction came, making Chloe arch her back. Sarah checked her quickly. It's progressing fast. I don't think the baby is going to wait much longer. Over the next 2 hours, as the snow continued to fall outside, turning Boulder into a frozen fairy tale landscape, something miraculous was happening inside the shelter. With Dr. Peterson guiding the birth with experienced hands and a calm voice, Sister Margaret assisting and praying softly, the other women from the shelter coming and going with clean towels and warm water, and words of encouragement, and General Miller holding his daughter's hand for the first time in years as she rode the waves of pain that brought new life into the world. Grace was born. The birth was quick but intense. Chloe screamed, sweated, cried, and held her father's hand with a strength that would leave marks. Arthur, who had faced battlefields without flinching, who had commanded operations where lives hung on his decisions, now had tears streaming freely down his face as he watched his daughter bring his granddaughter into the world with a courage he had never seen before, not in himself, not in any soldier he had ever commanded. A little more, Chloe, Sarah encouraged. You're almost there. You're doing great, really great. And then, at 10:17 in the morning, on a day Chloe would never forget, Grace emerged into the world. She cried loudly, immediately, healthy, perfect, with wet dark hair stuck to her tiny head and clenched fists fighting against the cold air. Chloe took her in her arms and collapsed into tears that were not of pain, but of profound relief, of instant, overwhelming love, of gratitude for being alive, for being safe, for having her daughter in her arms instead of buried in some snow-covered field because Ethan had completely lost control. She's a beautiful girl, Sister Margaret said, wiping Chloe's face with a damp cloth. Perfect, absolutely perfect. Arthur looked at his granddaughter, at that small, pink, noisy miracle, and felt something inside him he thought he had lost long ago, that he believed had been crushed under years of military discipline and hard decisions. Hope, renewal, the chance to get it right this time, to be for these children what he hadn't been able to be for Chloe when she was little. Leo, who had watched everything with wide eyes, approached timidly. Baby, my sister. Yes, sweetie, Chloe said, smiling through her tears. This is Grace, your little sister. Later, when Chloe was cleaned up and Grace was nursing peacefully, Arthur asked if she wanted to see Ethan. "He's outside. He wants to apologize, but he'll only come in if you allow it." Chloe thought for a long moment. Then she nodded. "I want to see him, but you stay here, Dad. Please." Ethan entered with his shoulders slumped, looking as if he had aged 10 years. He didn't come close, he kept a respectful distance. "Chloe, I don't have enough words to apologize. I was manipulated, it's true, but that doesn't excuse anything. I chose to believe the lies because it was easier than trusting you. I failed as a man, as a father, as a partner, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life." Chloe looked at him, this broken version of the man she had once loved. She felt pity for him, but not love. Not anymore. "Ethan, you need help, therapy, treatment, and you need to stay away from me and the children. Forever." "I know," he said, tears running down his face. "I'll sign. Whatever you want, I'll give up any rights. I just want you all to be okay." "We will be," Chloe said, looking at Grace, at Leo, at her father by her side. "We're going to be okay." Ethan left, escorted by Arthur's men. He would be prosecuted, receive a restraining order, and undergo mandatory treatment. But most importantly, he would stay away from Chloe forever. Victoria was taken to Denver, where she faced federal charges. The recordings of her calls with Ethan, the proof of manipulation, the evidence that she was illegally investigating classified military operations, it all came to light. She was sentenced to 12 years in prison. She lost everything. The office, the reputation, the freedom. The months that followed were a slow but real reconstruction. Chloe moved temporarily into her father's house in Denver, occupying the suite that had always been hers, now transformed into a room for her and the children. Arthur, true to his promise to change, learned to be a grandfather. He woke up in the middle of the night to help with Grace. He played on the floor with Leo. He talked with Chloe not as a general giving orders, but as a father, listening to his daughter. There was therapy, a lot of therapy, for Chloe to process the trauma, for Arthur to learn to express affection, for Leo to deal with the confusing memories of fear. It was hard. There were setbacks, bad nights, unexpected triggers, but there was also progress. Small victories that added up. Dr. Evans, the one who had made the call that changed everything, became a constant presence. He would visit under the pretext of checking on Chloe's postpartum recovery, but he would stay for dinner. He played with the children. He talked about books, about medicine, about life. There was no rush, no pressure, just a gentle constancy. A year later, on a spring afternoon when Denver was beautiful and in bloom, Chloe and David were walking through the botanic gardens with the children. Leo ran ahead, chasing butterflies. Grace, now 1, was taking her first wobbly steps. David stopped near the glass conservatory and turned to Chloe. "There's something I've wanted to ask you for months, but I needed to be sure the time was right." Chloe felt her heart speed up, but not with fear, with anticipation. "What is it?" He took her hand. "Chloe, you've shown me what true strength is. Not the strength to endure the unbearable, but the strength to choose to start over, to choose to heal, to choose to live. And I want to be by your side in that life. Not to save you, you've already saved yourself, but to walk with you. Will you let me?" Chloe looked at him, at this man who had waited patiently, who had demanded nothing, who had offered everything. She looked at her children, happy and safe. She looked at herself, and for the first time in years she liked what she saw. "I will," she said, and it was the truest yes she had ever given. The wedding was simple but beautiful, held in the garden of Arthur's house on an October afternoon when Denver was in full bloom. With only close family and friends present, those who truly mattered, who had been there through the hard times. Sister Margaret came from Boulder with some of the women from the shelter, Patricia, Amanda, and Isabella, all dressed in their best clothes, all smiling with tears in their eyes, as they watched Chloe walk down the aisle. Dr. Peterson was the maid of honor, wearing a blue dress that matched her kind eyes. Arthur walked Chloe to the altar, with tears he no longer hid, that he no longer felt ashamed to shed. Chloe wore a simple white dress, no exaggerated lace or complicated embroidery, just pure linen that fell softly over her body, finally free of constant tension. Her hair was down in natural curls, without products or elaborate styles. No heavy makeup to hide marks that no longer existed, just a touch of color on her lips and eyes. It was herself, whole, as healed as possible, free as she had never imagined she could be. Leo, now 4, was the ring-bearer, carrying the rings on a white cushion with adorable seriousness. Grace, at 2.5, was the flower girl, tossing rose petals along the path with more enthusiasm than precision, laughing when some petals stuck in her curly hair. And when David kissed her under the arch of flowers that Sister Margaret had helped assemble, sealing a union built not on blind passion or desperate need, but on mutual respect and invested time and shared truth, Chloe knew with absolute certainty that she wasn't being saved. She was choosing a love that didn't hurt but healed, choosing a partnership that didn't control but supported, choosing a future that didn't frighten but inspired. The years passed, bringing with them changes and growth that Chloe sometimes paused to observe with quiet amazement. Leo grew up strong and gentle, a boy who had learned empathy through pain, but chose not to let that pain define him. He protected his sister with a natural tenderness he had learned from watching David with his mother, seeing how men could be strong without being threatening, could have authority without being authoritarian. Grace became a curious and fearless girl, always asking impossible questions, always exploring the world with the innocent courage that only truly loved children possess. She was the heir to her mother's courage and her grandfather's determination, a combination that promised to make her an extraordinary woman when she grew up. Chloe went back to work 2 years after the wedding, when Grace started preschool, but she didn't return to hospital nursing. Instead, she accepted a position coordinating a support program for women in vulnerable situations, using her own experience not as an open wound, but as knowledge transformed into a tool for help. She trained professionals, developed protocols, visited shelters, and listened to stories that echoed her own. And every time she saw a woman find the courage to leave, to start over, she felt her own painful journey gain a greater meaning. Arthur, in the last years of his life, finally found peace. He would sit in the garden with his grandchildren, telling stories not of wars and strategies, but of hope and new beginnings. And one night, shortly before he passed away peacefully in his sleep, he called for Chloe. "Thank you," he said, holding her hand. "Thank you for teaching me that true strength is knowing when to yield, that true love is knowing when to change. You saved me, daughter. You saved me from dying a rigid, lonely man." "You saved me too, Dad," Chloe replied. "You showed me it's never too late to rebuild, never too late to choose differently." When Arthur passed away weeks later, Chloe cried. But they were tears of gratitude, not regret. They had had time. They had reconnected. They had healed what needed to be healed. Life went on, as life always does, with ups and downs, joys and challenges. But now, Chloe faced everything with a certainty she hadn't had before, the certainty that surviving hadn't been the end of her story. It had been the beginning. That strength didn't come from enduring everything alone, but from knowing when to ask for help. That true love didn't trap, it set you free, and that it was always worth choosing to keep going. Dear listeners, we hope that Chloe's story, of her impossible courage and her new beginning, has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by each chapter of this journey, if you felt the pain, the fear, but also the hope and strength of this incredible woman, please leave a like right now. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the intense stories we bring you every day. And in the comments, tell us which moment marked you the most. Was it the desperation of the escape? The power of forgiveness between a father and daughter? The birth of grace in the middle of the storm? Or the hopeful ending proving that it's always possible to start over? Your story matters too. Share it with us. And remember, just like Chloe, you are also stronger than you imagine. We'll see you tomorrow with another story that will stir your soul. Until then,